Welcome to EduCasts, home of EduCasters. The philosophy of naturalism in education. Imagine a school. When you close your eyes and picture it, you probably see a brick building. You see hallways lined with lockers, rows of desks facing a whiteboard, and a clock ticking on the wall. You hear bells ringing to tell everyone when to stop thinking about math and start thinking about history. You see a teacher standing at the front, holding the knowledge, while students sit quietly, receiving it. This is the school that society built. It is an artificial world, designed by adults to mold children into citizens, workers, and civilized people. Now, imagine a different kind of school, or rather, imagine no school building at all. Imagine a child learning about gravity, not by reading a textbook definition, but by climbing a tree and feeling the pull of the earth. Imagine them learning about biology, not by dissecting a preserved frog in a lab, but by watching tadpoles turn into frogs in a muddy pond over the course of a spring. Imagine a child who is never told to sit still because their nature tells them to move. Imagine a teacher who doesn't lecture, but simply sets up the environment and then steps back, letting the child discover the truth for themselves. This is naturalism. In the landscape of educational philosophy, naturalism is the rebel. It is the philosophy that looks at the complex machinery of modern schooling, the tests, the grades, the rigid schedules, the uniforms, and says, "Get out of the way." It argues that we don't need to build a child. Nature has already built the child. Our only job is to let that natural blueprint unfold without ruining it. We are going to take a long, honest walk through the philosophy of naturalism. We are going to look at its history, which goes back much further than you might think. We are going to unpack its sometimes shocking beliefs, like the idea that we shouldn't teach reading until a child is 12. We will look at how it changes the role of the teacher from a boss to a gardener. And, because we are being honest, we will look at the hard questions. Is nature always good? And can a child really survive in a modern digital world if they've only been educated by the woods? The roots of the rebellion. Back to the beginning. To understand naturalism, you have to understand that it is usually a reaction against a society that feels fake or overly complicated. While you can find traces of naturalistic thinking in ancient philosophy, the real explosion of naturalism in education happened in the 1700s, during the Age of Enlightenment. This was a time when Europe was obsessed with reason, science, and civilization. People wore powdered wigs, spoke in flowery language, and believed the human culture was the pinnacle of existence. Into this world crashed a man named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau is the undisputed father of naturalism in education. In 1762, he wrote a book called Émile, or On Education. It wasn't just a textbook, it was a novel, a story about the raising of a fictional boy named Émile, and it was a bombshell. It was so controversial that it was burned in Paris and Geneva. Why? Because Rousseau started with a premise that slapped civilization in the face. He famously wrote, "God makes all things good, man meddles with them, and they become evil." Think about that. The prevailing view of the time, and often the view of religion, was that children were born fallen or sinful, and needed to be corrected and civilized by school and church. Rousseau said the opposite. He said the child is born perfect. The child is born with a natural, healthy instinct for how to grow. It is us, the adults, the society, the schools, that mess them up. We force them to sit when they want to run. We force them to parent words they don't understand. We teach them to be jealous, competitive, and fake. Rousseau argued that the goal of education shouldn't be to make a citizen or a lawyer. It should be to make a man, a human being, and the only way to do that is to follow the laws of nature. Rousseau's Émile laid out the blueprint for naturalism. He argued that for the first 12 years of life, Émile shouldn't read a single book. Why? Because books are second-hand knowledge. They tell you what someone else thought. Rousseau wanted Émile to have first-hand knowledge. He wanted Émile to understand the world through his senses, his eyes, his hands, his ears. If Émile needs to learn about geography, he shouldn't look at a map. He should hike up a hill and look at the valley. This was a radical shift. It moved the center of gravity in education from the curriculum, what we want to teach, to the child, what they are ready to learn. The core beliefs, what naturalists actually believe. So, if we aren't using textbooks and bells, what are we doing? Naturalism isn't just running around in the woods. It has a specific set of principles that guide how a child should be raised. Number 1, nature is the master teacher. This is the headline. Naturalists believe that the laws of development are written inside the child's body and brain. You don't need to teach a child to walk. They will walk when their muscles and brain are ready. You don't need to teach a child to be curious. They are born curious. Therefore, the curriculum shouldn't be decided by a school board. It should be decided by the child's developmental stage. If a 5-year-old wants to play with mud and sticks, that is exactly what they should be doing. That is nature telling them they need to learn about texture, physics, and construction. Forcing them to hold a pencil and trace letters at that age is, to a naturalist, an act of violence against their nature. It is forcing a flower to bloom by prying open the petals. Number 2, sensory experience comes first. Traditional school is very abstract. We talk about things. We talk about history. We talk about photosynthesis. We talk about verbs. Naturalism says, stop talking. Show. Or better yet, let them touch. Naturalists believe that all knowledge begins in the senses. You cannot understand the concept of cold by reading the word. You have to touch snow. You cannot understand heavy until you try to lift a rock. In a naturalist education, the early years are entirely devoted to training the senses. The child learns to distinguish colors, sounds, smells, and textures. This is why you see so many natural materials in classrooms influenced by this, like Montessori schools. Wood, water, sand, metal. Plastic is seen as dead to the senses. Number 3, the concept of negative education. This is one of Rousseau's trickiest but most brilliant ideas. He argued that the early years of education should be negative. This doesn't mean bad. It means that instead of adding truths to the child's mind, the teacher's job is to prevent errors and vices from entering. Rousseau argued that if you try to teach a young child about virtue or duty or God, they won't understand it. They will just memorize the words to make you happy. This teaches them to be hypocrites. It teaches them to say things they don't mean. Instead, negative education means you protect the child from bad influences and let their reason develop slowly. You don't teach them to be good. You shield them from the corruption of society, so their natural goodness can survive. You buy them time. Number 4, natural consequences versus punishment. This is a huge one for parenting and teaching. In a traditional or behaviorist model, if a child breaks a rule, an adult punishes them. The adult is the judge and the executioner. Child breaks a window. Adult gives them a timeout. Naturalism hates this. It sets up the adult as a tyrant. It teaches the child to fear the adult, not the action. Instead, naturalists believe in natural consequences. The punishment should come from the thing itself, not the person. Child breaks a window, the room gets cold. Child refuses to eat dinner, the child goes to bed hungry. Child touches a hot stove, the child gets burned. Okay, we protect them from serious harm, but you get the idea. Rousseau argued that when the punishment comes from nature, the child accepts it. You can't argue with a cold wind. You can't beg a hot stove for forgiveness. The child learns the laws of reality. If I do X, Y happens. They learn responsibility without learning to resent authority figures.